My name is Kabir Saxena. I live in Delhi. I was born here and I'm a Tibetan Buddhist monk, and I work at the Tushita Meditation Center in South Delhi as an instructor and program coordinator. So I'd like to say a few words about how I became interested in the Buddhist path. It started, I would say, in England, where I was studying. I was a very thoughtful young man. My father was from Delhi, my mother was British, so I had influence of both cultures. So for a while that was quite confusing for me, but afterwards it became something quite rich. And it meant that I was interested in both Western and Eastern spirituality and religion. So at school we received teachings on Christianity and had some Christian prayers and hymns, and I was very interested in that. But I was also reading, when I was about 15, I started reading Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads and so forth in translation, and also reading some Buddhist texts, the Dhammapada and so forth. Then I became very interested in Zen Buddhism. And so by the time I went to university, I was interested in all these matters. And there was a very good Buddhist society at university, which I joined. The other big factor at that time was my mother's health. My mother told me very early on in my university career that she was actually dying of cancer. And she actually died in my second year of university. So you could say I was a serious young man and who was searching for answers to questions. And my mother had just passed away. And I found the Buddhist teachings were very relevant to me. The Buddha was speaking about just those kind of factors that were affecting my life. So I then participated in a 5-day course in Buddhist practice and meditation in the north of England. And after 5 days, I realized this was really something that I had to pursue deeper, further. It answered so many of my questions by listening to the teacher and by reflecting, meditating, discussing with the other students. It was very clear that this would be something I have to look at for a long time. And so there and then, at the age of 20 or so, I became a Buddhist, took refuge in Buddha and his teaching and the Sangha, the spiritual community. That time I was not a monk, of course. I was a lay person, but I became a Buddhist at that time. So that's really how I became involved. So let me explain a little bit what I mean by spirituality and religion and go more into depth. So now, spirituality and religion I don't see as anything different, actually. And I think too much distinction has been made. Religion has got a bad name sometimes because it becomes associated with an organization or a church or something fixed like that. But let's go into this a little deeply. For me, religion, if you look at the root of that word, in the Western languages, religion comes from Latin, relegare. This is the same actually meaning as the Eastern word yoga. It means to reconnect, relegare, to reconnect. So reconnect with what? Reconnect with reality, reconnect with truth. Yeah? The whole idea is that we are living untruth. We are not understanding ourselves, not understanding our world. We're living in a kind of unreal bubble which we have created out of ignorance. So relegare, religion is to reconnect us with the truth, okay? Spirituality for me also means the same thing, to go inwards, to deal with the spirit. We don't actually use that word much in Buddhism, but by spirit we mean the inner consciousness, the inner being. So to focus more on the inner rather than the outer. And of course, I would argue, many spiritual people, religious people would argue that one of the main reasons we are suffering in this world and destroying this world is because we are paying far too much attention to the outer, and not paying enough attention inside to our own minds, to our own spirit. So as a teenager, as I mentioned earlier, I was studying a lot, reading. I was actually a very introverted, rather a sad and confused person as a young man, and I suffered quite a bit, from feeling lonely and not good enough. I actually had some periods of quite severe depression as a teenager. I didn't take any medicine for it, but I was very lonely and depressed also, now and again. So when I started reading literature, you see, it became very clear that both Hinduism and Buddhism are about understanding suffering, understanding dukkha. They really get to grips with that, and how to then overcome it, how to work with suffering, how to overcome suffering, by understanding the cause and then applying the remedy. Whether you look at yoga, at the Ashtanga Yoga, in the full form, not just the physical exercises. So whether you look at that or whether you look at Buddhism, there's a whole path which shows us how to understand our suffering, understand the causes, and be free of them. So when my mother, for example, told me that she was dying, it was a shock. It was a shock. I was maybe 17, 18, and I became kind of numb, just something happens, kuch hota, and you really feel, how can I bear with this, So that kind of suffering was there, very real pain I had suffered, I had gone through, like many people go through. Many people go through much worse, of course. So by reading these very, very deep and practical teachings, I would say, of Buddha, but also getting, by the way, a lot of inspiration from the Gita, especially in the Gita where it speaks about life as a balance, having a balanced life, harmonious life. That was very inspiring for me. So, how does all this affect a person? How did it affect me? Getting involved with the Buddhist religion in England at the age of 19. How did it affect me? How does it affect other people? So I would say the main change in many ways is to really understand where our happiness comes from and where our suffering comes from. Because right now, you can see very clearly in the world, most people think their happiness comes from outside. Friends, money, fame, position, status, people praising you, the food you like, etc., etc. That is where happiness comes from. And where does suffering come from? People who are giving you a hard time. The boss is not behaving nicely. The politicians are behaving badly. Your wife or your husband or your children are not listening to what you say. All of these external reasons. Or you are sick. You get sick. So you blame the sickness, or if your doctor is not very good, you blame your doctor. Or if you think he's not very good, if his medicine doesn't work, then you blame the doctor or the medicine. Matlab, suffering comes from outside, right? Happiness comes from outside. So the spiritual view is completely the opposite. The main source of our happiness or suffering is our own mind. It comes from within, our own attitude, whether we have patience or not, whether we have wisdom or not, whether we are kind or not, whether we can develop compassion or not, meaning the wish for others to be happy, not just my happiness, main, ka jo mantra hum log japte rehte hain, not that mantra of me, my happiness. That's very selfish. So the more selfish we are, the more we suffer. And I think spirituality, genuine spirituality, that means, helps us to become much less selfish and much more in tune with actual reality. And we stop blaming others or the weather or the government, and we begin to look within. This is, I think, one of the main changes one can see in oneself and others who are practicing properly. So how does one impart this kind of understanding or knowledge to others, to the world? I always like to remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama's point when he says, my religion is kindness. One must develop a sense of universal responsibility and a good heart, a kind heart, that however educated you are, it doesn't make much difference unless you have a good heart, a kind-hearted attitude. So I think what I try and do in my life is to embody some kind of kindness and friendliness towards others, and that makes a big difference, I think, in my interactions with people. It makes them relaxed, it makes them open. So when we teach, we try to embody what we're teaching. We teach people at our center, for example in Delhi and many centers around India and the world. So we impart our knowledge in that way, through centers, through books, a lot through books, and of course modern media and so forth. But the main thing is to give a good example to others through one's behavior. So how am I behaving? How am I talking? How am I looking at people? Also, what am I thinking? That also has a big effect. So that is what we try to impart, and I think people are benefiting because when they meet with us, they feel they can trust us. We don't have some hidden agenda. We're not trying to just make money out of them. We're not trying to deceive them. Also, I think people appreciate they are being told the truth. Some people want a quick answer, कि ठीक है, सब ठीक है, बस थोड़े ये करो, वो करो, ठीक हो जाएगा बहुत जल्दी. But that doesn't work. No quick answer works. So we tell them the truth, which is what Buddha told. There is suffering. There is a cause. It's not going to go away overnight. You have to work at it. You have to maybe work quite hard. You might find your suffering is increasing when you begin to practice, because then you begin to see things more clearly, what is wrong. When you investigate, you see the problem clearer. So it can seem like there's more suffering. So one has to be patient. So I think people benefit from a deep approach. Just like a patient will benefit more from the doctor who gives a better diagnosis and says, look, your disease is quite deep, you have to take this medicine for a long time. But you'll benefit more than the doctor who says, don't worry, just take this, it will be quick, there'll be a quick result. No, you need a good doctor, you need good medicine. I think people appreciate that Lord Buddha was telling the truth. And even though it's a hard truth in the beginning, by practicing, people find more and more ability to accept and to understand and to realize one very important thing, that everything, all the happiness, contentment, peace we want, it's not up in the sky. It's not with the Buddha or with God. It's in our own mind, our own heart, and it is in a sense there right in this very present moment. We don't need anything more than the present moment. We're looking outside, this way, that way. The truth, happiness is present, depending on our relationship with the present moment, right now. So that is a very important, I think, aspect of it all, which some people are finding very, very powerful and useful. Also, I must add, the teaching that every one of us has the Buddha inside. Buddha is not in the sky, he is not 2,500 years ago only, he is in our own mind. We each have the capacity to wake up completely and become a fully awakened person. That potential is in you and me and everybody. And we find it by being present, not by going into the past, into the future, and so forth. We find it by being very alert, awake. So if we look at the Buddha's life, we see very clearly what slowing down, investigating, dealing with the realities of life can do. As you know, he was brought up in a very sheltered environment. His father didn't want him to experience reality, kept everything very artificial, you could say, around him. Young people, happy people, no old people were allowed. He was not allowed to see the realities of the world, the suffering. Now, he was a curious young man, he was intelligent, So he decided he had to check. He had to check what was going on in this world. So he one day was able to escape from the palace and actually see what is going on around me? And we can relate all of this to our own life. He went out, he saw sickness, he saw death, he saw old age, and he saw one sadhu sitting under a tree meditating. So this happens to many people. We get blown off course by a death, by old age, seeing our father or mother get old and die, or our own sickness. So this makes us wake up. This made him feel, what am I doing in this palace? With, all these young people, the dancing, the merriment, the eating. This is not reality. I'm being sheltered from the truth. So he realized he had to leave. He had to go deeper into the journey, into himself. And of course, long term, this benefited so many people. If he had just stayed in the palace and enjoyed himself and not dared to look inward or question what his father had in store for him, he would just be any other prince who is, enjoying himself. But because of his investigation, because he analyzed, and proper analysis is a very, very important part of mature spirituality. You analyze, you check, don't take anything for granted. Because he did that, he became a Buddha, a fully awakened person. If he'd not done that, nothing would have happened. So if we ask ourselves, what's the big picture? What's the larger goal? What's the context in which we are practicing and studying and so forth? Why are we doing this? What's going to be the impact on the wider world? You see, we are human beings living at a very challenging time of our history. Of course, all human beings would have said this, we're living in an important time. But let's look closely. We are living at a time when we have the technology, the ability, and we also have the short-sightedness and the greed to be destroying our world. We are destroying our planet. If you check up, we are destroying the forests, we are destroying purity of water, air, soil. There are tremendous imbalances in this world. People are leaving one country for another because their own countries are devastated, the seat of so many conflicts, war. So we are living at a very dangerous time ecologically, and for the minds of human beings have become so violent, so untrusting. We do not trust each other like we used to even 30, 40 years ago. And we're impatient, we're in a hurry, and let's face it, most of us are confused. We do not know the answer to our problems. We think the answer will come, many people think it will come from technology. Technology will save us. How can technology save us from what is basically an inner human problem of ignorance, of attachment, desire, wanting more than we have all the time? How can technology save us from our anger, our competitiveness, our miserliness, our impatience? Tell me, how can technology do that? This is not the role of technology. These problems can only be solved by spirituality, religion, proper investigation, and by love and compassion. Wisdom united with love and compassion. So that's the big goal, that's the vision. If we can help people find the source of wisdom and compassion and kindness within, and that's the only place it will be found. It will not be found in the sky or in some artificial intelligence. It's going to be found inside us, and the peace is going to be found inside us, the contentment, not outside. If we can help people do that, we'll have happier human beings who are being much less destructive to their planet, to their home, because right now we are behaving like insane people. Only insane people destroy their own planet, their own home. People with children, grandchildren, what kind of future are they thinking of for their children and grandchildren? Right now, that's where we're going to become awake. We're not going to become awake sometime in the future. It's going to be in a particular present moment. The past also cannot help us so much. It's dead, it's gone. We shouldn't waste our time too much with the past. So be present, be kind, realize the dreamlike, rainbow-like nature of reality, and then you won't be hurt, you see, by circumstances. You will flow in your life much more. You won't get hurt. Right now, because of our big ego, we get hurt every day, every hour. So be calm, be clear, be flexible, and try to practice daily some meditation. That's useful. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Thank you very much.